Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
I'm Susan Kaufman. I'm here for Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts webinar. We're pretty excited to talk about helping middle schoolers and high schoolers improve organization and time management skills. I don't need to tell you this, but students today have more demands, more distractions, busier schedules than ever before. And if, like me, you have ever said to your child, hey, what do you mean you don't know what the homework's due tomorrow? Or why didn't you bring home the right textbook? You have a pretty good idea of how challenging it is to stay organized for kids with ADHD. So today we're going to welcome Michelle Cooper and Michelle Gray, the founders of Student Organizers of Atlanta, Georgia, to offer strategies and tips and resources to help parents improve their children's organization and time management skills. And let me introduce Michelle Cooper and Michelle Gray. They have more than 25 years of professional organizing experience combined. They are active members of the National Association of Professional Organizers and the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. After running successful individual organizing businesses, they combined forces in 2006 to create Student Organizers of Atlanta and focus on organization for students. I would also like to extend a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's webinar, Play Attention. We are so grateful to our sponsors. They allow us to offer these weekly webinars at absolutely no charge to all the members of the Attitude community and anyone else who's interested. Play Attention is a brain training system. It's the only one that combines both advanced neurofeedback with cognitive training. And it aims and successfully does improve attention, behavior, and learning skills. It's for both adults and for children with ADHD. Play Attention is available for home and for professional use. Please visit the Play Attention website for more information, www.playattention.com. So thank you, Play Attention. Thank you, Michelle Cooper and Michelle Gray. And with that, let me turn it over to Michelle and Michelle.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Michelle Cooper and I are thrilled to share our thoughts with you. We're going to spend some time together today describing the ways in which we and you can help your students and families develop lifelong skills that will accommodate and honor their unique ADHD brains and their symptoms. So why do I emphasize families? Well, there's two reasons. All family members need to work together, and ADHD is, in fact, hereditary. So the chances are quite likely that others in the family are also challenged with ADHD symptoms. We're going to cover 5 different aspects of helping students with ADHD become more organized. First, I'm going to discuss a little bit about ADHD, and then we're going to move into the struggles today facing the children. And then the 3 last parts are the real meat of the presentation. We're going to understand processing styles, identify organization systems, and then work on the other types of assistance. So with that, we're going to get started, and we're on the correct slide right now with the heading Chronic Challenges. So most people on this call today are quite familiar with the chronic challenges faced by those with ADHD: attention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity in a variety of combinations for each different ADHD brain. As we prepare to share our strategies with you, it's important to keep in mind that those with ADHD have a 30% delayed development with regard to executive functioning. So in other words, an 18-year-old who is about to enter college is really functioning at a 13-year-old level. So picture yourself for a moment when you were 13. You were taken everywhere, your meals were provided, cleaning was provided, you were told when to be and what to have with you. You didn't really have that much homework, and you certainly had a lot of time to goof around. But now, all of a sudden, you're thrust into adulthood on your own. So we're going to turn to the next slide and share a little bit of numbers. You can read these on your own, but I just wanted to highlight a few points. When ADHD is diagnosed, the doctor should also screen for coexisting conditions, since they exist in 2/3 of the ADHD population. They can be neurodevelopmental, behavioral, mood disorders, and others. Typically, the strongest conditions must be attended to first, often before ADHD symptoms. We have had, for example, one student who had dyslexia, And first of all, his parents were absolutely in denial of this fact, and he had no strategies and no strategies to treat and work with his dyslexia. So really, dyslexia needs to be handled first before we could move on to teach him different organizing skills. We also have had students with oppositional defiance disorder, and as you can imagine, that most certainly needed to be addressed before we could make any headway. On the next slide, you can see the effects of ADHD drivers. As a result of the ADHD teen drivers' distractibility, which there's no denying, insurance premiums and other costs will also increase. So that's something to take into consideration. And on the next slide, talking about post-secondary education. So I want to discuss college for a moment. According to a 2013 study, only 15% of ADHD population in that study, I should preface, holds a four-year degree, while approximately 50% of that same population of ADHD students attends vocational school and junior colleges. So that's something to think about. ADHDers are expected to fit into a widely held standard when their brains may be open to a different type of learning, and especially in a different type of environment. And as example, a friend of mine's son literally could barely finish high school. He did, but instead of going on to post-secondary education, he went in the direction of apprenticeships based on his interests and his skills. Within a few years of training, at which he was paid for, he has now made $75,000 a year for the past few years with full benefits. So that's interesting. Occupational outcomes. The financial burden resulting from someone who never developed strategies to work with their ADHD challenges is really staggering. And the ADHD population is growing and aging, as we all know. On the next slide, healthcare. Okay, we could talk about this for hours, but we'll focus just on this point, and that we understand that healthcare costs are higher for someone who struggles with ADHD. But they also tend to have more injuries and more peer-related problems. And imagine that all of this is exacerbated by their inconsistency when it comes to taking their medications. And for those of you, on the next slide, for those of you who have neurotypical brains, much of what we're going to teach you today comes naturally for you. But all of our strategies can be helpful to everyone, and it helps society when individuals realize that people do not think alike. Their brains function differently than any other person's, and that we all face challenges of some sort. We all have our things. So why in the world should we help develop life skills and tackle these ADHD symptoms? Well, undeniable heredity and the need to reduce costs associated with driving accidents, healthcare, potentially unnecessary education costs, and the occupational outcomes. We need to provide these strategies also, most importantly, to increase the levels of self-confidence for these kids.
As Susan mentioned in the introduction, going to school today for our kids is a vastly different experience, and here are a few more reasons why. For those where college is the best option, know that they are looking for very well-rounded students. It's no longer enough to have a good GPA and strong SAT or ACT score, which leads to kids being involved in way more activities than in the past, which leaves less time available for schoolwork and in fragmented segments of time. Statistics are available on how kids are being assigned too much homework, but they are also being taught at a faster rate. What we learned in first or second grade, they're learning in kindergarten, and it goes on up from there. Additionally, pressure to take AP classes starts as early as 9th grade, so we have 9th and 10th graders taking college-level classes. We all know that kids today are heavily distracted by social media, the internet, gaming, and the like. It is especially true for the ADHD population, who are known to use technology as an outlet and to perseverate over. Kids are taught how to tell time, but they are not taught how to manage it, which is a very different concept. And in today's electronic era, time is displayed as a constant number on a phone, computer, microwave, etc. An analog clock provides a visual image of time passing, which is especially helpful for our visual learners. And while divorce is not a new concept, the way it looks today is vastly different. We are now seeing shared custody agreements where instead of dads seeing their kids on weekends and holidays, it is very common for kids to live in two homes. They split their time and possessions in two places, leading to double the stuff, less consistency, more room for error, and just having to remember more. All of these bullet points pertain to all of today's students, but for our ADHD population, it is even harder, and an additional layer of complexity is added to the mix. It is more important than ever that our ADHD kids get help with organization and have the right tools and systems, which need to be as simple and easy as possible.
Okay, so we are going to switch to the next slide, and this is a big part of trying to figure out how to help your student. First, we need to understand your child's unique processing style, and that is comprised of a combination of elements: the dominant behaviors, sensory preferences, introversion, extroversion, and gender differences. We're going to take all of these into consideration when we create organizing systems for the student. Let's explore these elements briefly. First, we will begin with the dominant behaviors. So here's an exciting slide. So with regard to the thinking part of the brain, we know that people tend to think and react in what we refer to as their dominant behaviors. When an individual is able to process and react to information while utilizing their dominant style, there's comfort and likely successful outcomes. However, when one is called upon to think outside of their dominant processing box, it can often lead to an exhausted brain, one with discomfort, as things are not coming as naturally to them. In reference to this slide, imagine for a minute that there is a line right down the middle that can be regarded as a left brain and a right brain. The left brain dominant people typically are analytical, where the right brain dominants are creative. And this is probably not news to those of you out there, but we'd like to take this a step further and divide it one more time. And we have now 4 quadrants that detail more specific dominant styles. A fellow colleague named Lana Nacone brilliantly assigned animals to each section. This is where you're going to discover what makes you tick, but more importantly, how your children and everyone else around you does as well. So let's start with a description of the animals on the left. A lion, he sits on his perch and has all the other animals do all the tasks for him. The people who are dominant in this quadrant are goal-driven and efficiency seekers. Think of a CEO. And a penguin is literally and figuratively black and white. They thrive in routines. People who are like this are exactly the same. They thrive in their routines. Consider a worker bee in a situation in work. So while detail-driven and routinized and typically analytical, the left brains struggle with change and flexibility. Let's shift to the right. A horse out in the wild will do his own thing in any which way he wants at any given time. The people who are dominant in this quadrant, they welcome distractions. They are creative, idea generators, and tend to have so many interests that multiple unfinished projects are a normal part of their lives. So think of an entrepreneur. Finally, we have dogs. Dogs love to be around other dogs and humans. People who are in this quadrant are people, and they like joining in, and they also get comfort with collections. Students who fall in this category enjoy being at school primarily to be with their friends. Consider in the working world, this could be like a social worker. So there's one important issue facing the horses and dogs on the creative side of the brain. Time is simply not on their radar. And perhaps now you can understand why maybe mom is always on time and dad never is, because they have different brain types. So if we move on to sensory preference, the second element in this processing style, we explore the sensory preferences. This can be also thought of as a dominant way, but in which they process stimuli in the world. When one is processing stimuli in their dominant sensory preference, more accurate, complete, and understood information will be learned. We take this element into account when designing our organizational systems for students, as it affects learning in a classroom as well as functioning as a student outside of the school. Interesting fact is that reading is an auditory processing skill, and viewing images and charts and displays is visual. Some people get confused with that, but reading is auditory. Next, we're going to talk about the levels of introversion and extroversion. This helps us determine a student's social and proximity needs. Interestingly, we have discovered that these levels also affect one's desire for feedback, whether it be internal or external. So this helps us when we can gauge that and help the families understand if constant praise is welcomed by their student, or if it is more likely perceived as constant nagging, depending on their level of feedback requirements. And then finally, the last part of the unique processing style is gender differences. Certainly books have been written, studies have been conducted in abundance around gender differences, especially from the cognitive perspective. Sound is believed that boys do not hear as well as girls. Visual, girls are more aware of facial expressions. This is why boys respond to higher volumes and girls respond to even the slightest tone accompanied by a look. So I'm sure there's people snickering out there, but it's true. Hearing in the classroom is more challenging for boys. If you come upon the situation where the teacher says, your son is not paying attention, you might want to have him diagnosed or checked by the doctor for attention deficit. I want you to say in return, you know what, where are they sitting? If they're in the back, please move them to the front and give them another chance. They simply can't hear as well as the girls in the back. And so now what? Now what are we going to do? Well, once we've gathered evidence and opinions from students, parents, teachers, and therapists or doctors, we take all of this into consideration when we design systems that honor the student's dominant processing style. The student will ideally be operating as naturally and comfortably as possible with what we refer to as the organizational recipe.
Your child's academic success is like a recipe with both ingredients and directions, which we have listed on these next two slides. Each of our children will use his or her ingredients differently and follow the directions that make sense to him or her. It is important to remember that his or her way may not look like yours or his or her siblings. What we do is determine the child's recipe by identifying the child's ingredients and directions that will best serve him or her. For now, we're going to focus on two of the most important ingredients with two of the most important directions. So we're now going to talk about planner and time management. We feel strongly that these two make up the foundation upon which all other ingredients and directions depend. Benefits of having good time management skills are using time wisely and more efficiently, which frees up more time to do the activities you want to be doing. Reduced anxiety and stress when you are in control of your time. Being on time is a sign of respect and caring for others, which does include teachers, and being able to make informed decisions. ADD kids tend to focus on this day only. Many of us have heard the expression, it's now or not now. They need to be taught daily versus weekly versus monthly. It is hard to know how to use time most wisely when everything seems to be of equal importance at the moment. We feel it is extremely important to learn the skill set on paper first. Once your child has mastered these concepts, he or she can then explore options to go electronic. The planner is the object by which your child can manage his or her time. And by having it all in writing and in one place, your child will have a more accurate picture of all of his deadlines and appointments. One of the main reasons why kids say they don't need a planner is because they can pull up teacher websites or blogs, which we feel should be a safety net for clarification purposes only, due to risks of technology failure and other reasons why blogs may not get updated in a timely manner. By writing assignments in the planner while at school, that automatically frees up time spent going from one blog to another to see what is due and when. Additionally, you are only seeing one tree in the forest, which does not include extracurricular or personal obligations. This is the one area we consistently get incredibly positive feedback from clients whose children are now more aware of time, not forgetting about assignments or leaving things to the last minute. Some general tips for planner usage include learning that upon receipt of assignments and projects, they need to immediately be entered into the planner. Whether they are entered on the day that they are due or the day they are assigned is not as important as just being consistent in doing so. Using an agenda can be anxiety-ridden for kids with handwriting issues, so have your kids learn abbreviations and have fun creating their own agenda language. It is important that assignments and projects get chunked or broken down into very small, manageable steps with specific deadlines attached to each that are input in the planner as well. Begin incorporating non-school activities, especially activity dates and times. Parents need to have weekly sessions where family commitments are communicated to children so that they can then include them in their planners. And our social, family, birthdays, holidays, trips, etc. And also make sure that your child does schedule in downtime or social time, because those are equally as important. One of our favorite expressions when working with kids is to always look ahead. It is very important to refer to the planner several times a day and also to look to see what is tomorrow like and even next week. Help your child take note of how they feel on the days where they've used their planner versus those they haven't. Hopefully, it is less stressful when they are using it. When it comes to penguins and lions, they tend to have very good time management skills. Penguins love their checklists, reminders, schedules, and routines, and a simple black and white planner will usually suffice. And lions are excellent at time management, with every minute being used towards reaching their goals. But they need more convincing as they tend to keep the information in their heads and may need help prioritizing and confirming that their goals are consistent with the rest of the family or group. Planner usage and managing time are not innate for dogs and horses, so they need more specific direction. When it comes to planners, dogs tend to respond well to color, so we recommend colored highlighters or pens to help mark deadlines. And with horses, we recommend having either an accessible pad of paper or even stapling extra paper to the back of their planners to jot down their many ideas, brainstorming notes to self, etc. Timers, clocks, alarms, and watches are crucial to help dogs and horses be more aware of time passing. We highly recommend analog clocks and watches for a more visual cue. The time timer is an excellent visual tool, and we have listed it in our resource section. Additionally, hang large and fun wall clocks in their bedrooms and throughout the house, allowing him or her to help select them. And if your child has an auditory sensory preference, it is important that you use alarms or timers with pleasing sounds. The next ingredients we want to discuss are the appropriate notebooks and backpacks for your child. When it comes to notebooks, options abound. First of all, is your child left-handed or right? Does he or she want a separate notebook for each subject or one central one? Lots of color or no color? Personalization, tabs arranged alphabetically in order of their schedule, or even most favorite subject to least favorite subject. Are their desks big enough to open up and spread out? We do not recommend multi-section spiral notebooks, as inevitably one section will get filled before the others. And with backpacks, we have numerous options here as well. There are ones with one big pocket and one small pocket, two big pockets and a small pocket, ones with lots of pockets, an open purse-like bag, and messenger bags. Systems must be simple and easy to follow with fewest steps possible. The system a child chooses is nearly as important as the ability to maintain and use it consistently. Start a no loose papers rule. Teachers are notorious for handing out papers as kids are packing up and heading to their next class, so it is just not realistic to think that papers can be put in their proper location at that time. We recommend a durable, two-sided vinyl-type folder to throw papers into until they get home, at which time they can be put in their proper location. To help ensure that homework and other paper communications, such as permission slips, can easily be found, both at home and at school, it is crucial that your child has a clear routine and understanding of where homework goes. Whether he or she uses a separate homework folder for all of their assignments or creates a designated place within each subject binder, it is important that your child uses the system consistently. And lastly, clean out their backpack every Sunday night. Make that a ritual and a routine so that they start each week organized. Penguins tend to prefer one color with very little personalization. If they do, they'll be very methodical about it. They do tend to do well with binders, as they will hole punch and label. So we recommend plastic tab dividers for each subject with pockets to help with loose papers as well. And with backpacks, they might like having compartments as they will assign them for different uses. Lions, one color with no personalization or decoration, as it serves no purpose and they cannot be bothered with it. But unlike penguin, they are not into hole punching, using separate folders or envelopes, and they want it simple with few steps. They may prefer one complete system for both their planner and folders, and their backpack will not be complicated. While all ADHD kids need systems that are simple and easy, dogs and horses need them in particular. If hole punching creates a backlog, or if the act of using a 3-ring binder with its many steps, 15 to 20 steps, by the way, to put one piece of paper into a proper section of a binder, we recommend accordion systems where papers can merely be dropped into each subject section. Vertical accordion folders exist which work well with backpacks. Dogs love their decoration and personalization, and they, as we've mentioned earlier, they will associate with colors. If blue is their favorite color and lit is their favorite subject, make everything blue for lit, etc. Use the same color pens and highlighters, and know that they will likely prefer 5 notebooks over 1 since they do love their collections. Horses also like colors, and they may prefer to set their notebooks up by having one for their morning classes and one for their afternoon classes. They may even want to change systems throughout the year just because they get bored. Tweak what they have if it's working well versus getting something new altogether, and know that there will be a lot of doodling on their binders. Both will prefer backpacks that represent their personality and be colorful.
Okay, so let's move in now to the types of assistance that can be provided. We have shared with you the methods we use to honor a student's unique processing style, but there are also other equally important strategies that we need to include and discuss here. We'll talk briefly about them. 2 factors significantly impact one's potential to train the brain, and these are really important. One is medication. It must be taken consistently. Medicine can even the playing field for those challenged with ADHD symptoms, so we don't want to give them an unnecessary disadvantage. Motivation is vital. If the student and or the parent, and I say and or the parent lack the requisite motivation, professional counseling may be needed. The success of training the brain only works when all parties are on the same page motivationally. The parties include the student, the parent, teachers, counselors, and even siblings. All the solutions that we have offered today, whether the use of an item or the implementation of a tactic, they require training the brain by creating routines, building habits, and establishing the brain's muscle memory. We need to exercise the brain muscle. Currently, others are doing this for you, the ADHD person, you. They are micromanaging your every move. They're telling you where to be, when to be there, how to get there, what you'll need. Now, when one is called upon to use his or own brain muscle independently, it will be in a state of atrophy. It needs more practice and consistency. We cannot stress repetition and consistency enough. So creating routines is really about making a process, a plan. And building habits are achieved by whatever techniques work. Building habits is achieved by whatever techniques work for an individual's brain, such as mnemonics, visualization, repetition, cues, charts, etc. And I'll repeat that. Mnemonics, visualization, repetition, cues, and charts. And developing the muscle memory, it comes with consistently repeating the routines that lead to the habits so that they will become automatic. This process can take as short as a few weeks or as long as a year. Regardless, consistency is the key factor in its success. For the ADHD brain, this process usually takes longer than shorter. So how are we going to help the ADHD brain succeed in this process of setting up routines and habits and muscle memory? It is vital that the student be assisted by a parent, a teacher, whomever, with consistency, with repetition. This means that a parent or somebody needs to sit down with the student and the backpack every day and go through the same process every day until this becomes a routine for a habit for the child. It also is going to involve the mother or father posing questions to the student to cue the repeated action. It's a much better strategy than telling them what to do. You need to ask them what they need to do next. And modeling the behavior is also very important. A final note on training the brain. Prioritization and time management skills are basically in a state of atrophy for the ADHD brain. So again, they struggle with prioritization and time management skills. Training the brain, when done with dedication and consistency, will prepare one's prioritization and time management skills for the marathon of an organized life. Okay, so another way of assisting is holistically. So we all know that people have many multi-dimensions, and we address all of those on this slide, especially medication.
Empowerment is a very important life skill that we all want to ingrain in our children. In order to encourage kids to implement recommended systems, routines, and tasks, they need to understand the benefits and reasons why they should do so. It creates buy-in and leads to higher chances of expected results. Ask your child, what is one thing I have done for you that you are willing to take on yourself? This allows you to work on one skill set at a time and your child to have input and take ownership. Help your child learn what systems work best for him or her. What tools do they need to be successful? How long can they sustain attention? What time of day is he or she most productive? Does color help? Does music make them more productive, or is it distracting? Work with your child to answer these questions, as self-awareness goes a long way. And as Michelle mentioned, be a good role model. If that means brushing up on your own organizational skills, then do so. Review your planner while your child does his, and point out ways in which being more organized benefits each member of the family and the family unit as a whole. It will get better each year, but it will take a whole lot of patience and practice. And as we've been saying, consistency and repetition are crucial. Remember, it is a process that involves honing in on each area very specifically and then constantly tweaking. According to Russell Barkley, an ADHD expert, a child with ADHD will have a 30% developmental delay in executive functions. Michelle mentioned this earlier. Adjust your expectation levels to your child's developmental age. Here are some additional recommendations to help build your child's empowerment skills. Help them find an organizing buddy. It makes organizing more fun, more social, and allows for accountability. This works especially well with our dogs. Research shows that mindfulness has an abundance of benefits. Practice it as a family. And additionally, be intentional by always asking, is this what I should be doing at this moment in time? Help your child become aware of what their triggers are for typical frustrating situations and what typical distractions exist. You can then put together a plan for overcoming them. Procrastination, a very typical issue for ADHDers. Assist your child in identifying where the procrastination comes from and what tasks he typically procrastinates on. Is it difficult getting started? Does perfectionism creep in? Is the task just too overwhelming? Is he unsure of where to start? Or is it just boring? Solutions include chunking it down, teaching good enough versus perfect, figuring out the very first step, no matter how small it may be, and just doing it, making the task more pleasant, adding creativity, creating a reward system, working for even a small period of time, and inserting a boring task between two fun tasks. And lastly, ask your child how he or she wants to be perceived by others, as someone that can be counted on or someone that is always late and forgetful, someone that pulls his or her weight on a group project or someone that doesn't contribute, someone that is good for his word or someone that can't be counted on.
Okay, we're going to talk about another type of assistance, and that's collaboration and advocacy. So the end goal, when it's time to shift into adulthood, the ideal is for the student to become their own conductor in the orchestra of his or her organized life. So you can see I've shown that You start off with a typical trio, a student, a teacher, and a parent. Then you move into the beautiful orchestra that is comprised of all of the other helpers on the team, and that's tutors and doctors and therapists and so forth. And finally, we have assistive technology. So most common assistive technologies address the recording of information. We've got a lot of them listed in the resource section of our presentation. I wanted to just mention a couple of things, and that is in order to record, to help with recording, the Live Scribe pen we recommend, and Dragon Speak is another one. And then there's always the good old-fashioned tape recorder, or even using a smartphone to take pictures.
In conclusion, we hope that your child can have a more successful school year by empowering confidence and developing abilities which lead to a lifetime of continued achievement, better health, both physically and mentally, productive family dynamics, and a happy, independent child. While we offer an array of services from student workshops to parent education presentations and working with schools, our main service option are the variety of individual and family assessments, which can be done in the home or virtually. We are providing you with all of our contact information. Please feel free to reach out with additional questions or for further information about our services. And if you don't live in the Atlanta area, no worries, as we can help virtually through Skype or web meetings. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we now look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. That was fascinating. Everyone listening in, please post what your major organizational challenge is with your child for school, just so we have a little record of that. And then while you're posting that, Michelle, maybe we could just turn back to the planner. And maybe you could give the listeners some more granularity about how to put in place the habit of using a planner. What many people posted was that they have a very hard time getting their child in the habit of using the planner. They find a lot of resistance to the planner, and they're really looking for some strategies that they can use to help their child develop that habit that you so carefully described so well, that habit, that muscle, habit, mind muscle habit of using a planner at every moment. How does a student get from having a planner to actually using it over time, and what practically can a parent do to put that into effect?
I think that Michelle tried to touch on that with her list that she repeated twice about mnemonics and cues and checklists and all of that. So what we've done when we work privately is we provide our students a whole binder of tools that we use to work with them. And it is like any other habit, just like we do when we train our brains to leave the keys in the basket by the front door. And you may need to put a sign on the door, or when you walk in, put keys in basket, and you look at that every time. And then eventually, the next thing you know, you no longer need the visual cue to remind yourself, and you do it without even thinking about it. So it's the same skill set, and you need to, again, understand your child and how they would best take in reminders. If they're auditory, then verbal reminders will be great. But if they're not auditory, then you can tell them here, there, and everywhere verbally. It's not going to sink in. So use the list that Michelle provided and come up with a phrase, a mnemonic, a visual chart or checklist, and use it, again, just consistently and repetitively until that habit gets ingrained. And hopefully, too, we believe that once they start seeing the benefit and how it's helping them on a daily basis, alleviating some stress and giving them more time to do the fun stuff, that will create the motivation and buy-in to continue doing it because they're experiencing the benefits on their own.
Also, okay. I'd like to just take a step. Could I just take a step back and remind us that to get to that point that Michelle was describing, one needs to, as a parent or as a teacher, sit down when they get home from school, ask them to take their planner out of their bag, ask them to open it up where they think they need to open it, ask them to look at it, ask them questions about what are you going to do, what are you going to do first, and that is something that will have to be repeated many, 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 many times, just like a person needs to learn that they brush their teeth in a certain way or they turn on a car in a certain way. The child needs to be coached with somebody repetitively day in and day out until they can do it on their own. And then another thing that we like to do is we like to make a chart that each student goes through at the end of the day. And several of those things they're going to check off are going to be, did I look at my planner this morning? Did I look at my planner in between classes? Did I enter everything in my planner? Did I check my planner before I went to bed tonight? So those things, if they can check those things off, that will be helping to establish the habit. And at the same time, it will be giving them positive reinforcement at the end of every day.
That sounds like a great suggestion. I think the number one question that's posted here is, my child forgets to use the planner. How can I get them to write things down? How can I get them to bring it home? How can I get them to open it? So,
and this is where collaboration with the teachers is also helpful. If they can explain to the teacher that this is something that they're working on, and if they can help reinforce it at school, that would be extra helpful.
Okay.
And also the use of the fun use of the assistive technologies, that can keep their interest up to the point where they say to themselves, ooh, the teacher just wrote the assignment on the board. Yay, I get to bring my phone out now. I'm allowed to bring my phone out now to take the picture. So, sometimes assistive technologies can be interesting for those with ADHD because it's something new and different they get to do in class at that moment.
Mm-hmm. The planner consistently gets lost at school. I'm getting a lot of those comments here about the difficulties using a planner. So I'm guessing. Do you? Yeah. It sounds like it's easier said than done with a kid who has a hard time with organization.
Well, one of the things that is one of the ways to assist with routine and habit building is one of the techniques is visualization. So this can work with the planner also. We once had to work with a student in middle school who always forgot to bring his lunch bag home. He somehow he always knew where it was when it was time to eat the lunch, but he always forgot to do anything with it after lunch. So every day he would come home without a lunch bag. So what we would do with visualization techniques is we would just kind of walk through their day virtually with them and say, what do you do when you get to school? And if they say, I go to my locker, we're going to say, okay, what are you doing in your locker? Where is your planner? They say, I don't know. And we'll say, well, where does it need to be? And so they say, it needs to be in my hand. So then we will come up with a visualization, some kind of silly something or other that they will immediately remember when they open up their locker that tells them planner needs to be in hand. It might be some silly visual that they're going to remember, like someone's jumping out of their locker at them and handing them the planner or whatever the case may be. And the same would be true of leaving a classroom. We help them visualize some kind of crazy image so that they always think, where's my planner? Where's my planner? So that's the kind of technique that really is required in order to make this be consistent.
Mm-hmm. I see. So another common comment here, which I must say that I identify with because I have a child in this category, is that people's children who write slowly or uncomfortable writing. And so the planner is a problem for them and they're much more comfortable with a keypad or with their phone. Have you ever found a situation where a child is able to use their phone as a strategy for tracking assignments?
Yes, and we've listed some resources for that as well. We try to go the paper route first for all the reasons you mentioned, but we've given y'all some resources for that. And because oftentimes, if it is indeed the case that it just can't happen on paper, there's some options. And then, that's why I made my comment as well, is just make up abbreviations. T is test, WS is worksheet, whatever the case may be, so that they can just get down what they need as succinctly as possible and have fun with it. Like we said, create their own little agenda code language if they need to. But yes, we've given some calendar resources for you.
And also they can seek the help of the teacher.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. How that's a common, also a frequent question from parents. How do they involve the school and the teacher in the organization? And what can they realistically request as part of an IEP on the organization front?
There are very typical ADD accommodations that include everything from preferential seating, again, that puts them more towards the front of the classroom and or near the teacher. So if you need, like my son needed a lot of visual cues for a while from the teacher, and so he was, within her eyesight. Extended test taking time is often very common. For schools where they still use a lot of textbooks, it's common to ask for a second set of textbooks at home so they don't have to worry as much about remembering which books they need and when and leave them. And then I think that, and my daughter had organizational meetings set aside on a regular basis with teachers or counselors to help check in with her. So you can set those up. And I think just in general, I am a huge advocate. I've been down this road. I have one child with a 504 and one with an IEP. So I've lived this life myself. And teachers appreciate the honesty. I know some parents are uncomfortable. They don't want their child labeled or treated differently. And I certainly understand that. But I really feel very strongly, and as Michelle mentioned, in terms of our creating a symphony, to work as a team. It does take a village, and if you can say, these are some things we're really working on with Johnny, what can you do? Can you check in with him, or can you even create the verbal cue like that they may come up with that guides him to pull out his planner and write the homework in that she's about to assign. They are willing to work with you. You just need to communicate and ask and check in.
Okay.
And the other thing, you specifically asked about what the teachers can do on in a hands-on kind of approach. Now, I know that they have got a classroom full of kids, and they cannot focus on every single one of their individual needs. But for someone who simply can't write, if they aren't allowed to take a picture of an assignment that would be on the board, if it's even on the board as opposed to verbally transmitted, they may request that the teacher just hand them a piece of paper at the end of every class, and it's just got the assignment written so that later when the parent sits down with the child and goes through the planner, they can take that loose paper where they gathered all their loose papers for the day, and they can transfer that into the planner or onto the computer system or whatever it is that they are comfortable using.
And they can also request, and it's a common accommodation to ask for copies of teacher notes ahead of time or a PowerPoint presentation. You can ask for that in a presentation and as an accommodation as well, which helps with the handwriting. They can listen more.
I have a couple of good comments here that I'll just pass on to the listeners. From Rafaela, she said, we checked the planner every day and initialed it at the bottom when it was complete. And, ready for this one, we paid our child $1 for every day the planner was completed. We also started
We are not opposed to bribery.
Bribery will get you everywhere.
We were going to say we emphasize positive reinforcement. Yeah. Most of the time when we go into a family's home, they say, oh, well, we're taking away their privilege of being on the wrestling team until they can get themselves organized. And we try to turn it around to be more positive, in so many different ways. Like if you will write in your planner and go through it every day, we will give you another day of wrestling practice, or you'll earn the right to try out for the team again next year or something like that.
Positive reinforcement makes sense. Rafaela also said we started planning the summertime before. We did pretend scenarios, when to pull out the planner, when to write in it, when to check it off. So that was an interesting strategy.
Love that.
And Stephanie says something interesting. She said, my husband and I both use Google Calendar for time management, and our children see us using our phones for that purpose. Could we print it out each day? And use it with our kids? She thinks that her children would get irritated writing things on paper and then once again in a Google Calendar. Have you seen families use a Google Calendar or Google Apps successfully?
Yes. And we highly recommend that families do that with a family calendar, whether it be Google or, one on the refrigerator, whatever the case may be, in order to communicate and for the kids to refer to. I have one on my refrigerator, and when my kids ask me when something is, I say, I don't know, go look on the refrigerator. So family calendars are crucial, and the information needs to be communicated. And if a system like Google is working well for the family, then latch on to that, or else create one as a family.
Right, and especially pay attention to each individual's processing style. Some people simply can't process the electronic version. They need to touch and feel spread out paper, and others can't stand papers. They make them crazy. They need to be electronic. So try to take that into consideration when you're trying to come up with your family communication piece.
That makes sense. Back to your point about understanding how your brain works and what works. Here's a question from Mona. Do you have some specific ideas for managing specific assignments? So, for example, how to write out when it's due, or write out the pieces of it, or how to close it out when it's complete? Do you have suggestions for students for managing assignments over time?
I think I'm understanding the question, but if not, please, let me know and clarify.
Okay.
But if you're talking about a task, what I heard is, breaking it down, and
yeah, I think she's asking,
closing it out.
Right. How would you manage the pieces of an assignment? How would you suggest managing an assignment?
So we use project planning worksheets with our kids, and it's not complicated, but we have some sheets that we use where we literally will take something, chunk it down into the smallest steps possible, and then discuss how long we think each step will take, and then we input those into the planner so that they have their deadlines, and then as they're done, and we are huge proponents too of crossing things off when you do them. If anybody's even remotely like me, I will write something down just so I can cross it off. And there is, for a large percentage of people, some satisfaction. So, as they go and as they've completed each task, to check it off is a feeling of accomplishment, and then they know where they are in the project.
And if we talk about more of the short-term homework, like sitting down for one evening, doing your math assignment. So as a parent, you can sit down with them and say, okay, look, you've got math. We see what it is. How are you going to start? Then what are you going to do? How will you know when you're done? When you're done, what are you going to do with the worksheet that you have just completed? And that steps them through the beginning, the middle, and the end of the process. And so again, they then become able to ask themselves when they sit down to do any homework, what do I need right now to start? What does it mean to do it? And most importantly, what do I do with it when it's done? That's really important. The being done part is really difficult for a lot of the horses out there because they get so bored and they think of something else to do that they forget to finish up a lot of their tasks. So it's very important to follow up with, now what are you going to do about it? Where is it going to go so that you can hand it in?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the famous homework gremlin that we hear about a lot, where the homework somehow gets done but just never gets turned in, right? I mean, that seems to be a common.
So we had a whole section of our presentation to address this, but we had so much. We had to make some edits, as we say. But I will say that in our definition of doing homework is not done until every assignment is in its proper homework location. Everything is packed up in the backpack, which is zipped up and sitting by the door to go out the next day. That's when homework is done.
Right.
Not just to say, oh, I did all the worksheets, I did all my reading, and it's still scattered all over the kitchen table or wherever. As assignments are completed, put them in their proper location, put that stuff away, pull out the next subject. So that will help Mark when you're completed too. It's completed when it's put away.
And the good news is that as the students age and progress in the levels of the grade levels, they're going to be asked to hand in a lot of their homework online.
Correct.
So that's going to take that one difficult part of handing in homework away. The physicality of the handing in the homework is going to be taken away by the electronic submission of the homework. So every child, I can imagine, is going to know, when I'm done with this, press send. They're not going to not press send because there's a sense of satisfaction by hitting send. And I don't know any student who doesn't know that the send part is crucial. So that's good for the people who are getting into the older grades.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of people here. Marie, who says that their son makes a digital scan of completed homework and then emails it in case he loses the paper. Another person, Melissa, says our teachers allow emailing homework. It's great. So just as you say, avoiding the whole losing the paper phenomenon makes sense. This project planning worksheet that you mentioned is very intriguing to the listeners, and they wondered if you have anything that you might share with them, or a place where you'd suggest that they find a project planning worksheet.
So a project planning worksheet, as Michelle said, doesn't have to be complicated. Imagine, if you will, that you have a task to plan a party. Okay, so the top of the worksheet would be plan a party. And then what you would do is you would just start spewing out of your brain all the things involved with planning a party. You've got to get the decorations. You've got to figure out the invitation list. You've got to go buy the invitations. You've got to find their addresses, et cetera, et cetera. So you start listing all those things out. While you're listing the things out, then you might want to assign the amount of time you believe it will take to complete that part of the task, of the project. Once you have made this whole list and you feel like you've just explored all different aspects of it, then you need to kind of order it and put it into your calendar. So, for example, I'm guessing the number of people you'd want to invite in the invite list. That's probably going to be a first step because it will determine so many other things. So you want to look at your list and you'll say, how long did I think it's going to take me to come up with the address list, with the invitation list? I thought about an hour. So where can I find an hour in my day, week, month, whatever the case may be, to work that hour on finding the address list? And then you continue down the road until you get to the end where you're finished and turn it in. That's always an important part. Turn it in as the last step, or complete the project or have the party, whatever the case may be. It should be very simple, but it's all about chunking down this large project into small, measurable, easy to complete tasks and fitting them into your life, into your calendar.
You can just use a simple blank piece of paper. It doesn't need to be fancy. And some brains will automatically, like mine most likely would list things pretty sequentially. But for a lot of people, and especially, right-brained individuals, it may come out in any kind of an order. So once you do the initial brainstorming part of it, like Michelle, then you can go and, put it to the right order, or it depends on how your brain processes. But you can just use a blank old piece of paper.
Now, people who do have ADHD, these two, the time management and the prioritization, come into play here. And those are the areas that they really, really struggle. That's what project management is all about. So again, train the brain. You're going to have someone assist them time and time again when it comes to project planning until they get it. They know what questions to ask themselves and they know how to do it. And also note that a project is, in our minds, anything that has more than one step. So anything, so put your shoes on. Okay, there's two steps to that. There's find the shoes, and then there's tie the shoes. So, anything that can be broken down into multiple tasks to complete the whole project should be. And again, practice with assistance.
And we encourage you to practice this kind of stuff with both academic and non-academic. So I'm actually glad Michelle used party as an example, because sometimes it's not the book report or science project, but maybe they're getting ready to go off to summer camp. That's packing for camp is a project. It's a little more fun than a science project, but it's the exact same skill set. So you can really practice this skill, pull out that piece of paper and start saying, what do we need to do before you can go off to camp, or whatever the case may be.
Okay. So we're out of time because there's so much more we could say, but I just had one last question for you. You said something interesting about families practicing mindfulness together as a family. Mm-hmm. Can you give us some brief thoughts on how that would work?
I think that this is an area where families should really, look to see what will work best for their schedules. First of all, we had one client who she and her children would do mindfulness exercises every single morning before they got in the car. She had to drive them to school, and they would take 5 minutes between breakfast and getting in the car where they did it. So that's an option. You may want to tie it in with this whole family time that you might have on the weekends where you're looking at family calendars and cleaning out backpacks on Sunday to prepare for the week. Maybe that can be accompanied by something where you all just take some time to be mindfulness, maybe be intentional about, what you want, something good and something bad that might have happened over the weekend or what they're hoping for this week, and just take time and do, you can find any number of mindfulness or yoga or meditation kinds of tapes and resources out there. So, look and see what would be, well received by the family and schedule it in. Right. Absolutely. But tie it into something maybe that you already have planned.
And there's a micro level also to mindfulness, and that is at any moment in any time, you always need to be asking yourself and be mindful of what is it that you're doing? What are you supposed to be doing? And is this what you should be doing? And an example is when you're in the shower, why don't you, instead of thinking about 1,000 other things, think about what do I do next in the shower? Now, all of this comes naturally for all of us because it's routine, typically. But have you ever sat in the shower and said, what do I do next? What does this feel like? I wonder, am I doing this right? And what comes next? But you know what? Everybody in the shower, I can guarantee, is thinking about 1,000 other things going on instead of being mindful. So mindfulness is also at the micro levels, being aware of what you're doing right then and there, and is it the right thing to be doing?
Okay, with that, I'm going to have to sign off. This was incredibly useful. I know that everyone would love to have several more hours of your time. Thanks all, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.